오클랜드 시장 후보 인터뷰, 오늘은 그 두 번째 시간으로 필 고프 후보를 모시고 얘기를 나눠보겠습니다.
Look, for you and I, we've got our own homes. We've got our feet on the property ladder. But what about our kids and our grandkids? How can any young family today afford a house that they have to pay $1 million for and still raise their family? We wonder why our kids are not having children of their own, maybe not for women until they're now well into their 30s. Well, it's because how can they, first of all, pay rent, which is very high, save money while they're paying rent, and then when they've saved enough money, try to keep up with the rate of house prices, which have been going up by $2,000 to $3,000 a week. We have to have a better balance of supply of houses to meet the demand, or the housing bubble just will keep growing and growing until one day, when interest rates go back up again, or there's a shock to the economy, that housing bubble will burst, and that will come at a huge cost to those that have bought homes in the last, 1 to 6 years, and a huge cost to the pressure that will put on how well our economy can do in Auckland. So let's try to get that balance between supply and demand. Let's stabilise the house prices. If they keep going up the way they do, that will end very badly for us in Auckland.
The house price already there. Can you put down the price?
It's something that actually the council, neither the council nor the government can absolutely control. If we, because of a shortage of housing and the rapid rising price of houses, if we don't deal with that situation, we'll get a price fall all right, but it will come in a dramatic way. In Dublin and Ireland, house prices in a couple of years fell by 43%. That left people with bigger mortgages than their house was worth. I don't want to see that happen in Auckland, so how do we help prevent that happen? By trying to stabilise our house prices as quickly as possible. Building more, maybe reducing some of the demand on our housing, which comes in part from people investing overseas. Australia's got that right. If you want to invest from another country in Australia in housing, you've got to build a new house. That adds something to the community. If people invest from overseas and just push up the price of existing houses, that just adds inflation to us. So we've got to do those things better too.
You mentioned about housing problems. Auckland is now one of the world's least affordable cities.
It's a title we don't want. Yeah, that is true. We are the fourth least affordable city after other cities like Vancouver and probably Melbourne and Sydney. And that's largely because of the house price inflation. While our population's been growing at the moment by 45,000 a year, we haven't been growing the number of houses to cater for that population growth, and we haven't been growing our transport system to cater with an extra new 800 cars a week in Auckland. So houses are becoming less affordable, roads are becoming more congested. Those are the two critical problems we have to start to address in Auckland.
One of your policies is Million Trees program.
Yeah.
You want to plant more trees?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's several reasons for that. Firstly, we all want to live in a green, beautiful, pleasant place to live, and trees do that. When I was at Auckland University, what I loved in the summertime were those tall elm trees. You'd walk down the road and they softened the environment, they made the environment more pleasant to live in. But there are economic reasons as well. Under the Paris Agreement on global warming, we have to reduce our emissions of carbon, or we've got to create carbon sinks to absorb that carbon. We're a third of the country's population, so by planting more trees, we're absorbing carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, creating oxygen, better air quality, fewer costs of having to meet our very high carbon emissions. Secondly, we live around a beautiful harbour, the Waitemata Harbour, and the Hauraki Gulf. What is a big problem there? It's siltation of the harbour and the Gulf. it's destroying the fish habitat, it's making the quality of our water much worse. If we plant along our rivers, our streams, our creeks, our coastal areas, we can reduce the flow off of soil into the harbour, off the farms, the nitrates and the phosphates, and we improve the quality of our water. So I think it makes sense. Can we plant 1 million trees in 3 years? Absolutely we can. We'll have a more beautiful city, cleaner air, cleaner water. Who wouldn't want that?
But in Auckland city centre, I think there are not much space for planting trees.
No, but you'd be surprised. If you go over to Bastion Point, the local Maori iwi there have been planting tens of thousands of trees around that coastal area. You go to the playgrounds and the parks and reserves in Auckland. We've been planting in my local electorate area, turning areas that are just pretty ordinary into places that really will become quite beautiful. In some of our parks, we've been planting fruit trees like lemon trees, so local people can come and help themselves to some fruit off the tree when they're in season. And we're getting the kids involved with that, we're getting the service clubs like Rotary involved, we're getting the private sector, companies like New Zealand Steel wanting to invest, and you know, we're getting people like the Warehouse, Sir Stephen Tyndall, he is really keen on this idea. He wants to make a difference. In our islands in the Gulf, we've made them predator free, we're planting trees, we're bringing back the native bird life, takahi, kiwi, kokako. So it's a win-win-win situation, and I think we can get some real enthusiasm from the community behind our program. We want our ordinary people in the city participating in this, not professionals doing it on their behalf, professionals planning, but local people, kids from our schools, growing trees from seeds, planting those seedlings. That gives them a greater awareness of the environment they live in.
I think you want doing more with less fiscally.
Yeah. Look, when we created our city, the so-called super city, we turned 8 councils into 1 council. That was designed to stop duplication and waste. But have we realised that yet? I don't think so. I think there's a lot more efficiency to drive for.
On the process, maybe.
Yeah. Look, I'll give you an example. A lady in Auckland, she's running a car sharing business. She wanted 3 car park spaces in town. She turned up to Auckland Transport for a meeting. She said there were 8 officials there. 8 officials to discuss 3 parking spaces, and not one of them had the power to make a decision. Now that strikes me as gross inefficiency. I think that there are things that we are still wasting money on. When I was a minister, I was dealing with billions of dollars of expenditure in ministries like the Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We had to learn to do more with less. Each budget round, we had to show that we were making economies, doing things smarter, doing things better. That pressure has to be put on our council bureaucracy as well.
And I think, and many people will feel that the transportation system in Auckland area is very heavy and very serious, I think. Do you have any good policy for that?
Every week it gets worse, because every week we add 800 new cars to the road in Auckland. You know, I think the Ministry of Transport in Wellington, the Wellington bureaucrats, think that we're still just a big provincial town. We're not. We're a small global village. When you travel around global cities internationally, you know that everybody doesn't drive themselves alone in a car down the motorway. We have good public transport systems. And what I'm talking about for Auckland is firstly more busways. The North Shore busway that we put in place when we were in government has been a huge success. Nearly half of all North Shore residents travel into town by the bus in peak hour. They get there quicker, more comfortably, and without having to have the hassle of finding parking. So we need more busways. But ultimately our busways will start to get congested. On Simon Street in town and Queen Street, we've got 140 buses an hour going down the road. So what do other cities do? They have electric light rail. One light rail combined or double carriage can carry 400 to 500 people. A bus carries 60 people.
Yeah.
Double decker maybe 100. So we need a public transport system that provides an alternative for people to taking their cars down the motorway. If we build more motorways, they quickly become congested. We've got to be like other big cities. We've got 1 million more people coming. We need an effective and an efficient public transport system. So light rail, to me, is the area that we have to do the business case for. If it works out as I believe it will work out, we then have to say to the government, you're taking our GST, you're taking our income tax, you're taking our company tax from Auckland. When are you going to put something back to actually meet the cost of our growing population? And for us as travellers on the roads, we're going to have to pay a share of that too with road pricing, as they do in most other countries. We can't get something for nothing, but right now we're wasting $3 billion a year on congestion and gridlock, and it's going to get worse. We have to act, otherwise this city just comes to a grinding halt.
What do you think about the subway system?
I'd love to have a metro system in Auckland, but I think the economics would probably count against us. When I'm in New York, when I'm in London, what do? I travel by subway. Great metro system in New York, great underground in London. But to do that in Auckland now would probably be more expensive than we can pay for. So the alternative is, say, what Melbourne does with its light rail, or Brisbane does with its light rail. These are cities that we would normally compare ourselves with. What we can't do is sit back and wait for the situation to get worse. We have to start planning now, because even if we start planning today, it takes a number of years to put that new system in place.
One of your policies, protecting Waitemata.
Yeah.
Make Waitemata Harbour clean.
Yeah.
Is that something to do with the planting program?
The trees will help, but there are some other factors that we have to take into account. We have a wastewater system for our sewage, and we have a stormwater system for the rain that comes down off our roofs. Sometimes those two were wrongly integrated, so that when it rains heavily in Auckland, we overflow our sewage systems and they go into the harbour. That's terrible for a first world city. We are creating a central interceptor from the centre of town. That it's a big project, a multi-million dollar project. It's probably $500 million at least. That will solve 80% of the problem. So we need to work with Watercare to do that. We need to stop all of the material flowing off our roads, off our new housing developments, off our farms into the harbour. But there's one other thing we have to do for our harbour. We've got to stop Auckland Port gradually infilling more and more harbour. Otherwise our second harbour crossing will be, you'll be able to walk from Auckland Port to Devonport, because they have just moved more and more into the harbour. Ultimately, we've got to look for another site for our port. Let's return our Auckland waterfront to the people of Auckland. Let's use it for high value added commercial, residential and public open space purposes. Wynyard Wharf is a great example of how we've done that, and we need to do that for a much greater section of the wharf. The tank farm, where the tanks will go, Cook's Wharf, where the cars need to go, and ultimately, but maybe not for another 20 years or more, to remove the containers to an alternative port site.
Anything else about your policies you want to talk?
Just a couple of other points very briefly. Firstly, at the last elections, only a third of Aucklanders voted. This city belongs to all of us. We all need to get out there and vote for the leadership that we know that this city really needs. So please, when your voting papers come through the mailbox, don't put them on top of the refrigerator and forget about them. Fill them out immediately and post them back. Have your say. And I want to make sure that all of our communities participate fully in that process. As a mayoral candidate, I would like a strong mandate from the people of Auckland that I can then take to Wellington and say, I am here to advocate for Auckland's needs. Don't just listen to those Wellington bureaucrats. Listen to what more than a third of the population is telling you that Auckland needs to solve our housing affordability problems and our traffic congestion problems. If I get that mandate, a strong mandate, that puts me into a strong negotiating position with our central government to get a fair share for Auckland. That's all we're asking for, a fair share.
Okay. 오클랜드 시장 후보 중에서 오늘은 두 번째 시간으로 빌 고프 후보를 모시고 그의 정책에 대한 얘기를 들어봤습니다. 아마 앞으로 투표하실 때 많은 도움이 되셨을 줄 압니다. Thank you very much for your time.
감사합니다.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.